Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I never planned to spend retirement fending off a land grab, but when a ruthless HOA tried to steal my home using forged documents, they picked the wrong ex-cop to mess with. What started as paperwork turned into war, and I wasn't going down without a fight. I never thought I'd spend my retirement years defending a patch of Colorado dirt like it was the goddamn Alamo, but here we are. My name is Robert Ashton. Most folks just call me Bob. I'm 48 years old, and after 22 years of chasing burglars, squatters, and property scammers for the Larimer County Sheriff's Department, I traded my badge for a beat-up pickup and a piece of peace and quiet. I bought myself a small house nestled against the foot of a pine-covered hill. 1.2 acres, detached garage, carport, garden shed, proper perimeter fencing, and a front porch with a swing I actually installed myself. I call it the Bastion. Not out loud, of course. I'm not that dramatic, but in my head, it fits. The place had been owned by an old war vet named Val Harris, tough son of a gun, even in his 80s. I'll never forget the day he handed me the keys and said, "They offered me twice what you're paying, but I ain't selling to jackals. Keep it safe. Keep it free." His hands were shaking from Parkinson's, but his eyes were like steel. That was 4 years ago. I never forgot it. See, my little patch sits between two wolves eyeing the same sheep. On one side, Ridge Hollow Preserve, a sprawling HOA-controlled suburb packed with identical beige nightmares and professionally offended Karens. On the other, a private logistics company that's been frothing at the mouth to get access to the main road that runs along my property's edge. They want to cut a corridor through it to save fuel and time. 10 minutes shaved off deliveries. To hell with principle, right? In the first year, one of their contractors tried burying a fiber line under my eastern fence line at night. I caught the guy with a shovel and a Red Bull, claimed he had municipal approval. What he got was a court summons and a scar on his ego. Second year, a landscaping crew from Ridge Hollow showed up uninvited with hedge trimmers and a clipboard, said they were there to trim the overgrowth. They didn't get past the front gate. Third year, some anonymous busybody filed a vacant property complaint, said my house was abandoned. Imagine their face when the inspector found me oiling my shotgun on the porch. They backed off after that. I didn't hear a damn thing for nearly 2 years. Peace. Beautiful, boring, glorious peace. I installed more cameras, upgraded my fencing, and lost myself in my small routines. Fixing things, planting, walking the woods. Even started wood carving, which I suck at, but it's mine. Then last week, the winds changed. It started with the HOA electing a new president. Her name came up in the local bulletin. Karen McDaniels, 56, former city administrator, retired early, likely pushed out, known for her attention to procedural compliance. A bulldog in a pantsuit. Rumors spread fast. She had a reputation for lawsuits, rezonings, and being a visionary leader in community expansion. The type who calls herself efficient while steamrolling anything not in uniform. I kept an eye out. Checked my mail more frequently. Made sure the locks were lubed. Cameras were clean. You don't do 20 years in law enforcement without developing a sixth sense for when a storm's coming. And it didn't take long. Last Thursday afternoon, I was coming back from the feed store. Bought some gravel, weed killer, and a 12-pack of decent beer. As I turned onto my gravel road, I noticed something off. A white SUV parked just outside my gate. 2 men in matching polos stood beside it, like mall cops on patrol. And there she was. Hair perfectly curled, sunglasses big enough to shield her from sunlight, and moral accountability. Karen. I parked the truck, stepped out slowly, made sure my keys were visible. Didn't want to startle the patrol puppies. "Can I help you folks with something?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Karen stepped forward, brandishing a folder like it was the 10 Commandments. "Mr. Ashton, I'm Karen McDaniels, president of the Ridge Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association. We're here today to inform you that this property is now considered part of our community common use zone. You'll need to vacate the premises immediately." I stared at her for a solid second. Blinked once. "Say that again." She smiled, tight and plastic. After a routine audit and cadastral reassessment, it was determined that this land falls within the Ridge Hollow Managed District. You are currently occupying what we now recognize as shared community space. I let out a laugh before I could stop myself. "Lady, I've got my deed framed and notarized. Title survey, property lines, everything's clean. I'm not under your HOA. I never was. She didn't even blink. That may have been true before the reassessment. However, with the corrected documents filed this month, your land now qualifies as managed territory. If you refuse to comply, we will contact law enforcement and report you for illegal occupation and unauthorized development. One of the goons stepped forward and took a picture of my mailbox. I turned to him. You just committed trespass, I said calmly. You're standing on private land. No, sir, Karen cut in. He's standing on community land. I walked over to my gate, opened the lock, and held it wide. Then step through, I said. Come on. Let's test your theory. They didn't move. I shut the gate. Karen held up the folder again. You'll be receiving formal notice. I suggest you begin preparing to leave voluntarily. We're being generous here, Mr. Ashton. I'd hate to see things escalate. I looked at her for a long moment. You picked the wrong house, I said, and definitely the wrong man. She smiled that smug little HOA smile. We'll see. They got in the SUV and drove off, the tires kicking up a thin veil of dust that settled slow, like ash after a fire. I stood there for a while, gravel crunching beneath my boots, and just watched the road. The last time I had this exact feeling, 2 weeks before that pawn shop sting turned into a 3-man shootout in an alley behind a laundromat. Retirement my ass. The letter arrived 2 days later in a thick manila envelope marked with Ridge Hollow Preserve's smug little logo, a pair of evergreen trees flanking a tasteful serif font, the kind of branding that screams, "We will ruin your life politely." Inside were 21 pages of bureaucratic vomit, formal notice of reassignment, parcel boundary reclassification, HOA governance integration documents. I recognized the lingo. It was the same type of legalese I used to dig through when busting shady developers for quiet rezoning attempts. Only now it had my name on it. According to them, my land had been erroneously excluded from Ridge Hollow's formal zoning perimeter during initial development filing, and had now been corrected via supplementary GIS overlay authorization under Colorado Municipal Parcel, Consolidation Procedure 12B in English. They drew new lines on a map, filed it without telling me, and were now claiming my land as theirs. The envelope included a highlighted section that read, "As of the date of reassignment, the following codes apply to the property known as parcel. 14B, mandatory HOA compliance, quarterly dues, architectural review, and shared access allowance. All non-compliant structures must be brought up to HOA standard within 90 days. Non-compliant structures, they meant my garage, my porch swing, hell, probably my grill." There was also a bright pink slip inside labeled Final Warning, Voluntary Compliance Deadline 10 days. I laughed. Then I swore. Then I laughed again, but louder. I spent the next few hours pulling out every document I owned. Title deed, plat survey, zoning certificates, tax assessments. Hell, I even found the receipt for the gravel I laid last summer. Everything matched. No easements, no shared access, no HOA. Never had been. I scanned everything into a single PDF, titled it, "You're Not Getting a Damn Inch," and emailed it to the county recorder's office just to be safe. Then I sent a copy to a lawyer friend of mine, Dana, who owed me a favor from when I helped her brother beat a bogus vandalism charge years ago. She called me back before sunset. "Jesus, Bob, this is a hostile paper grab," she said. "They filed something with the county all right, but it's full of holes. GIS overlay my ass. You didn't sell. You didn't vote. This isn't binding. Yet, they're trying to manufacture jurisdiction. That reassessment, it's junk. But if you don't fight it now, and they get away with enforcing it just once, just one fine, one forced compliance, they can use that as precedent in court. Suddenly, you're part of the HOA, whether you like it or not." I swore again, this time with intention. The next morning, I installed 2 new cameras, one covering the front gate, the other the rear perimeter facing the Ridge Hollow border. I didn't like how quiet it had been since Karen's little visit. I've dealt with people like her before. When they're not yelling, they're plotting. That afternoon, a white SUV cruised by my gate again, slowed, stopped, took a photo. I waved from the porch. No response. They drove off. By the end of the week, I received 5 more envelopes. The first was a compliance observation notice, citing aesthetic disruption caused by outdated fencing materials. The second called out unauthorized signage, referring to the no trespassing signs I'd put up since moving in. The third was a demand for payment, $312 in initial compliance penalties. The fourth, a flyer about upcoming HOA elections with a helpful QR code to submit your vote as a new community member. The fifth was a formal HOA welcome packet, glossy, branded with a damn coupon for 15% off mulch. They were trying to bury me under paperwork, drown me in red tape, make me look like the crazy old man yelling at clouds while they slipped the knife in through procedure. I decided to push back. I walked the perimeter of my property using a measuring wheel and the original 1972 plat map that Val had kept framed in his old barn. Every stake was where it should be. Every boundary was accurate. I took photos, geotagged everything, and uploaded the entire walkthrough to a cloud drive. I wasn't just defending a property anymore, I was building a case. The next escalation came from the neighbors. Folks who used to wave stopped waving. A couple walking their dog crossed the street when I came outside. A kid tossed a soda can into my ditch and made eye contact like he wanted me to say something. I didn't. Not yet. Then someone left a flyer in my mailbox, unsigned, but printed in the Ridge Hollow font. It read, "Your presence here is disruptive. Please do the right thing and vacate the kicker." Attached was a blurry aerial photo of my property with a giant red circle around it and the words, "Community Expansion Opportunity." They weren't just claiming my land, they were marketing it. I drove into town that night and sat in a diner for 3 hours just sipping bad coffee and watching the quiet. I thought about Val, about what he'd said that day on the porch. Don't give these jackals an inch. They wanted inches, yards, acres. They'd get nothing. I woke up to the sound of tires on gravel and boots on stone. It was barely past 6 in the morning, the sun still bleeding gold across the tree line. At first, I thought maybe it was another delivery truck turning around, or one of those nosy HOA stooges back for their daily voyeur session. But then I heard the unmistakable thud of knuckles on wood. Firm, rhythmic, authoritative. Not the HOA. Cops. I pulled on jeans and a flannel, still barefoot, when I opened the door. What I saw made me stop mid-step. 2 Larimer County Sheriff cruisers, lights off but engines running. 3 officers. One of them, Deputy Collins. I knew. We'd worked together on a rural theft task force almost 10 years back. "Collins," I said, arms crossed. "Bit early for a reunion." His face was tight, apologetic. "Bob, we've got an order. Civil enforcement. Temporary possession notice." I blinked. "You're kidding." He wasn't. He handed me the paperwork. I scanned it fast. 25 years on the force teaches you to read the good stuff first. It was signed off by a municipal judge. Not a district judge, not a land court, municipal. I'd seen this trick before. Get something filed fast, push it through under the radar. The order declared my residence as a non-permitted structure erected on municipal land without approval, pending demolition review and community use reassessment. They were classifying my house, my legally titled tax-paying insured home, as an illegal shack squatting on public land. "Where the hell did this come from?" I asked. Collins sighed. "Your land's been reclassified on the city parcel map. According to this, you're squatting on what's now municipal property. HOA submitted the request for enforcement. I held up the title deed like a damn holy relic. This says otherwise." He looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I believe you, Bob. But the order's active. I can't override it. You've got the right to challenge in court, but for now, you're here to take my home. We're here to execute the possession order. You're to vacate." Temporarily, I looked past him. A 4th deputy was already walking toward my shed with a clipboard. My cameras were still up. Everything was being recorded. I felt the burn in my chest, not just anger, betrayal, humiliation, and then came the final insult. As I stepped forward to talk to the 2nd deputy, another cruiser pulled in. Not police. Karen, of course. She emerged like she was stepping onto a red carpet, dressed in a perfectly pressed blazer, clutching a Starbucks cup, and that same goddamn binder from before. She stood just outside the gate, flanked by her 2 patrolmen. One of them was the guy who took photos of my fence last week. They both had on those high-vis HOA vests, like they were working security at a farmer's market. She didn't say anything, just smiled and raised her cup. "You enjoying the show?" I called out. She raised an eyebrow. "We warned you, Mr. Ashton." Now the law is handling it. I walked back inside. I grabbed my badge from the old shadow box over the fireplace. I didn't wear it. I wasn't a cop anymore, but I wanted them to see it when I came out. I handed it to Collins. "You know what this is?" He looked down. His lips tightened. We're not here because we want to be. I know. As they began to tape off my porch and photograph the exterior, I asked one last question. Who signed off on this reassessment? He flipped through the paperwork. Name's Harold Trent. Trent's retired. Apparently he submitted the revision 2 months ago. Backdated. Karen had used a judge who wasn't even on the bench anymore to sign a forged reassignment. That wasn't a zoning error. That was fraud. When I asked if I could grab a few things before being removed, they gave me 10 minutes. I took my laptop, a hard drive with all my scanned documents, and one other thing, my old service revolver, legal, licensed, and cased. Just in case. When I stepped off the porch, the younger deputy reached for my elbow. Sir, I need you to move faster. I looked at him. Son, you don't need to put your hand on me. Are you refusing to comply? No, I'm walking. At a pace my knees agree with. And if that's not fast enough, you can carry me. That earned a chuckle from Collins. Karen, though, she wasn't laughing. She stepped closer, and for the first time, she spoke directly to the deputies. Why is he still here? He's trespassing on Ridge Hollow property. Collins turned to her. Ma'am, step back. This is a county matter. Her face went pale, not with fear, rage. She wasn't used to being told no. As I was escorted to the car, not cuffed, but still treated like a suspect, I looked back at my home. My porch swing swayed gently in the breeze. The gate I welded myself creaked slightly. My American flag fluttered in the rising wind. Then I saw Karen snap a photo with her phone. I smiled. She had no idea what kind of war she'd just started. The Larimer County Detention Center hasn't changed much since I retired. Same flickering fluorescence. Same burnt coffee smell, same awkward silence broken only by distant clanks of steel doors and the occasional cough from holding cells. I wasn't technically arrested. They called it a protective detainment pending clarification of ownership rights, but being walked through that intake room without a badge on my chest felt like swallowing glass. They held me for 6 hours. I spent 5 of them going over the court order in my head, memorizing every misstep and red flag. By the time they let me out with a copy of my temporary release papers, I was 2 parts humiliated, 3 parts pissed off, and 1 part calculating. As soon as I was clear of the building, I did what I should have done the moment I saw Karen at my gate. I made 2 calls. First to Rick Delgado, Assistant District Attorney, former partner, fellow pain in the ass, back when we were working property crime task forces in Fort Collins. Second to Marcy Talbot, now a senior analyst at the State Land Commission, and, conveniently, my old precinct's go-to resource for shady deed fraud. Both answered on the first ring. Bob, Rick said, I saw your name in a case flag this morning. What the hell is going on? Karen McDaniels happened, I growled. And she's using ghost paperwork to get me thrown off my own land. Marcy's voice was even more direct. You're gonna need to send me everything. Title, deed history, parcel revisions, GIS overlays, whatever they used to pull this off. By sundown, I had a war room set up in a cheap motel off the 25, the kind with polyester bedding and a buzzing fridge that hadn't worked properly since the Bush administration. I wasn't going back to the house, not yet. Not until I could walk back in with a file so thick it made judges sweat. I emailed everything, scans of my deed, my surveyor's report, the court order that kicked me out, and the so-called reassigned cadastral map. The responses came fast. From Rick, the parcel reassignment was processed using an expedited override, usually reserved for emergency public infrastructure. That's insane. There was no vote, no hearing, and the request came from a defunct account last used by a city employee we fired 3 years ago. From Marcy, your parcel history hasn't changed since 1972. That reassignment form is dated March of this year, but the digital timestamp says it was uploaded last week. Classic backdating. And the signature, Trent. He died in January, dead man's signature. Just beautiful. That night, I met with Dana, my lawyer, in the motel room. She brought her paralegal and a bottle of rye, bless her heart. Karen's not just flexing HOA muscle, Dana said. She's committing structured fraud. If we can prove coordination with public officials, we're looking at conspiracy. Think she's got help inside? I asked. Oh, no doubt, she said. You don't get a judge to sign an emergency property seizure without greasing the right wheels. And that GIS overlay, somebody in the land office had to process it. The timing's too tight. Marcy backed that up with hard data. She forwarded internal logs showing a batch of parcel revisions submitted from a Ridge Hollow IP address the same day Karen's HOA board met for their expansion strategy session. According to a public HOA agenda she helpfully found archived on their community blog. The kicker? That session listed one agenda item: integration of parcel Ashton, zoning consolidation and community access initiative. They'd actually named me. Bold move. We decided to hit them with a temporary restraining order. Fast. Dana filed it electronically the next morning, citing fraud, trespass, property seizure without due process, and wrongful municipal enforcement. Judge Renner, someone Dana had worked with before, approved the motion, freezing any further action against my property pending review. In parallel, I hired an independent cadastral expert. I needed someone with an unimpeachable reputation, and I knew just the guy, Vernon Nye, 72, cantankerous, and allergic to bullshit. He was semi-retired, but still carried weight in land survey circles across the state. I bribed him with smoked brisket and a half case of Coors. We met the next day. Vernon showed up with 3 topographic maps, a laser rangefinder, and a look that said, "This better be interesting." He didn't disappoint. After 3 hours walking the boundary line, Vernon lit a cigar on my back patio, technically trespassing, according to Karen, and said, "Ain't nothing shifted here since Carter was president. Their new lines cut across your chicken coop and that drainage ditch. No way in hell this was a natural adjustment. They drew the damn thing by hand." Exactly what I needed to hear. Meanwhile, Rick pinged me again. His people had dug into the judge who signed the original removal order. Turns out the man hadn't been active in 6 months. A visiting municipal authority had submitted the affidavit for reassignment, none other than Karen McDaniels, under the title Community Integration Consultant. That's not a thing. By Friday, I had a restraining order filed, a surveyor's affidavit, a GIS discrepancy report, and an assistant DA raising red flags about forgery and procedural violations. The court scheduled an emergency hearing for Monday morning. I was officially back in the game. But the thing that really rattled Karen's cage, when I had Vernon post a big wooden stake on the front of my locked gate painted in red, "Private property, court order filed. Violators will be documented and prosecuted. CCTV active. Live stream enabled." I watched on my phone as Karen's SUV rolled by 2 hours later. She stopped. She got out. She stared at the sign. Then she threw her coffee at the gate and peeled off. That was the first time I smiled all week. Monday morning came cold and dry, the Colorado sky as clear as my intentions. I shaved for the first time in a week, put on my one remaining suit that didn't smell like gasoline or courtrooms, and walked into the county courthouse with a manila folder tucked under my arm like a loaded weapon. Dana was already inside, sitting with that quiet, coiled energy she gets when she's about to fillet someone alive using nothing but case law and sarcasm. She handed me a copy of the HOA's rebuttal filing. "They're doubling down," she said, flipping through pages. "They've submitted new documentation, a notarized declaration from Val Harris himself, stating that he agreed to transfer the property to Ridge Hollow HOA before his passing." I froze. "From Val?" I asked. "He died 4 years ago." Dana nodded grimly. Date on the document is 3 days before his death. Signed, witnessed, and sealed. My stomach dropped like a bad elevator. The hearing was short, procedural only. Judge Renner reviewed both filings, examined our temporary restraining order, and scheduled a formal evidentiary hearing for 2 weeks out. But even from the bench, you could tell he was raising his eyebrows at what he was reading. When it was over, I walked out and called Rick. "They're claiming Val handed them the land," I told him, 3 days before he passed. "Send me a copy," he said immediately. "I want my forensics team on it." Marcy, too, jumped on it like a hawk. Within 24 hours, she'd tracked down the notary listed on the document, someone named Anita Wallace. But there was a problem. Wallace had lost her notary license 2 years earlier due to inconsistent verification practices. Translation, she notarized whatever the hell people shoved in front of her. I reached out to Val's son, Matthew Harris, who lived in Texas now, managing some big cattle ranch in Amarillo. We hadn't spoken since the sale, but when I explained what was going on, his voice dropped into a cold, flat register I recognized from funerals and courtrooms. "They're using Dad's name," he said. "You've got to be kidding me. Claiming he signed over the land to the HOA on his deathbed." "That's a damn lie," he said. "Dad spent his last 2 weeks at the VA hospice in Fort Collins. He couldn't even feed himself at that point, much less sign legal documents. Can you testify to that? Hell yes. He flew in 2 days later, showed up to my motel room with medical records, hospice admission dates, and a signed affidavit from the nurse who cared for Val. According to the timeline, Val had been moved into palliative care 5 days before the date on the so-called land transfer. By the 3rd day, he was nonverbal. By the 4th, he was unconscious. He died the next morning. There was no possible way he signed anything. Dana was furious but focused. This changes everything. If they submitted this knowingly, it's not just a civil fraud case anymore. This is document falsification, forgery, possibly even criminal conspiracy, Rick agreed. His team traced the document's metadata and found it had been scanned from a Ridge Hollow office computer. Worse, it had been used before. A nearly identical signature, dated differently, had been attached to a property dispute with the logistics firm 2 years prior. The parcel in question had been donated to HOA stewardship by the family of a deceased owner. But that owner's daughter later proved in court that no such donation occurred, and she'd never even heard of the HOA before they tried fencing off her shed. That case had been quietly dismissed, covered up, buried in the HOA's internal files. Pattern, intent, malice. With the evidence mounting, Judge Renner granted us limited discovery. That gave Dana the opening to subpoena Ridge Hollow, HOA's internal communications. What we found in their emails made my jaw clench hard enough to crack molars. Karen had circulated a memo titled Acquisition by Any Means, Phase 2. In it, she outlined her plan to secure strategic perimeter parcels via quiet reassignment and community narrative management. One section described recycling historical, documentation where enforceable, a sanitized phrase for document laundering. Attached was a PDF labeled Harris Donation Scan dated 4 years ago. Same signature, same language, different date. She'd kept it, used it, reused it. I stared at the screen and felt something old stir inside me. Something from the job I thought I'd left behind. The urge to slap cuffs on someone, hard. Marcy's voice crackled through the phone that night. We've got enough for criminal referral. Rick confirmed it. His office filed a motion to open a criminal investigation into the Ridge Hollow HOA and its officers, naming Karen McDaniels as a central figure in an alleged multi-property fraud operation. Then came the bombshell. Late Friday evening, I received a call from Vernon, my surveyor. "You're going to want to see this, Bob," he said. I pulled archived footage from a drone flyover we did during a county-wide forest fire assessment 3 years ago. It shows the original boundary stakes on your land, clear as day. All still standing. Their map overlay. Total fiction. He paused, then added, "Also, one of the HOA's own trail cams was installed facing your back fence. I doubt they remember it's there. Want the footage?" Damn right I did. Vernon drove out that night with a flash drive. On it, footage of Karen and 2 men, both HOA board members, walking the perimeter of my land at dusk, blueprint in hand, spray painting their own fake boundary markers. Clear. Caught. Time-stamped. Dana saw it and immediately added it to the evidence packet. "You're not just going to win your land back," she said. "You're going to break them." I didn't say anything, but I did go back to the motel fridge, grab the last beer, and toast a ghost named Val Harris. They tried to use his name. Now they were going to choke on it. I didn't sleep the night before the raid, not because I was scared. I've had guns pointed in my face, been trapped in burning buildings, even survived a meth lab explosion that took out 2 squad cars and half a barn. No, this was different. This wasn't adrenaline. This was justice loading its clip. Rick called me at 7:14 in the morning sharp. "Warrants were signed at dawn," he said. "We're going in before they know what's coming." "You need me there?" He paused. "Just stay out of the way." "You're too close." "Too close?" "Yeah, I was. I was practically welded to this mess. But I didn't stay away. I parked 2 blocks from the Ridge Hollow HOA office in downtown Fort Collins. Nice little brick building tucked between a dental clinic and a frozen yogurt shop. The irony stung. You'd never guess this cheery place was the epicenter of a fraud ring targeting elderly property owners. At exactly 8:05 a.m., 2 unmarked SUVs rolled up. Then came the cruisers. Then came the investigators. 6 of them fanned out like a military unit. Badges out, guns holstered but visible. Within minutes, they were inside. I watched from my truck. Karen hadn't shown up yet. Her Lexus pulled into the lot at 8 o'clock 12 minutes. Perfect timing. She didn't even get the door open before they surrounded her. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the flash of disbelief on her face. She waved her hands, pulled out her phone, tried to smile her way through it. Then her wrists were behind her back, and the cuffs clicked shut. She screamed something, probably "this is a mistake" or "I'll sue all of you." Classic Karen. She was escorted into the SUV with all the grace of a sack of compost. Her two favorite patrolmen followed not long after, hauled out from the back office where investigators found a locked filing cabinet labeled Community Adjustments. Inside, hard copies of at least 7 forged transfer forms, all donated by dead owners, all notarized by Anita Wallace. Rick met me an hour later on the sidewalk. "You were right," he said simply. "Yeah," I replied, "but I wish I wasn't." He handed me a copy of the preliminary report. They had enough to pursue charges of fraudulent conveyance of property, document falsification, tampering with public records, conspiracy to commit theft, wire fraud, attempted racketeering. Apparently, Karen wasn't just freelancing. The HOA had been coordinating with the logistics firm on the other side of my property. That detail hit me like a gut punch. I'd suspected it, sure, but now I had confirmation. The deal was simple. The firm wanted access through my lot to cut delivery time by 9 minutes. Karen promised to deliver the land through reclassification, falsified HOA votes, and selective legal pressure. They even had a drafted agreement in place for a right-of-way lease, pending transfer of Parcel 14B. That's my land. The smoking gun, one of Karen's emails to the logistics CEO. We're 90% there. Once we neutralize the Ashton obstacle, we finalize access, neutralize the Ashton obstacle. I read that line about 10 times. The logistics company was now under investigation too. Not just civilly. Rick's office kicked it up to the state attorney's office for corporate collusion and bribery. Apparently, 2 land commission employees who'd signed off on the reassignment had financial ties to Ridge Hollow board members. One of them even owned shares in the logistics firm. It was bigger than HOA politics. This was organized land theft. By the end of the week, 7 arrests had been made. Karen, her 2 henchmen, Anita Wallace, and 3 Ridge Hollow board members. One of them cracked within 24 hours and gave up the entire chain of coordination. That's when the real fireworks began. Dana filed a motion to permanently sever my property from any and all future municipal or HOA boundary amendments. Basically a legal force field. She also requested punitive damages and public compensation for emotional distress, trespass, and unlawful detainment. Meanwhile, Rick and Marcy prepped a grand jury case. According to her, the HOA operated more like a racketeering cell than a neighborhood council. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the linchpin of a statewide case against suburban corruption. HOAs across the state started scrubbing their records within days. Forums blew up with panicked board members asking if legacy transfers were still legal. News vans rolled up to the Ridge Hollow Preserve entrance. One reporter actually climbed onto my fence to get a better shot of my front yard. She got a shot of something else instead, a new sign I'd mounted just under the camera. Private property not subject to HO trespassers will be filmed, fined, and featured on the evening news. The HO was suspended by emergency injunction. Court-appointed receivers were sent in to audit finances, records, and communications. Turns out, Ridge Hollow had been misusing dues for years. Karen had been reimbursing herself for consulting hours and home aesthetic reviews, including one she conducted on her own damn pool. I sat in on the emergency town meeting held the next weekend. The community hall was packed with residents, some pissed, some shocked, most embarrassed. A few even apologized to me. One guy, Dale, came up and said, "I voted for Karen. Thought she was efficient. Turns out she was just efficient at screwing us." I shook his hand anyway, because this wasn't about petty vengeance anymore. This was about making sure no one else got steamrolled by power-hungry suburban tyrants. And it wasn't over yet. 2 months later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom that smelled like mildew and arrogance. The state had indicted Karen McDaniels and 5 other defendants under multiple charges, including conspiracy, fraud, forgery, and attempted theft of real property. But this wasn't just about my case anymore. No, this was about a systemic rot that had been quietly growing beneath the beige paint and cookie-cutter fences of Ridge Hollow and HOAs, like it all across the state. I was called as a key witness. Not because I had legal credentials, but because I had something stronger. Proof. The trial was held in the county superior court. Judge Holloway presided, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who once sentenced a city councilman to 3 years for embezzling sidewalk repair funds. She didn't smile much, which I respected. Smiling judges make me nervous. Rick delivered the opening statement, and it was a thing of beauty. Laid out like a crime novel with bad villains, faked maps, and a dead man's signature at the center of it all. They didn't just try to take a man's land, he said. They tried to rewrite history to do it. The courtroom murmured. Dana handled my prep. She drilled me for days before I took the stand, made sure I knew what to say, what not to say, and when to shut up. I wore the same suit I'd worn the day I bought the house from Val Harris. Seemed appropriate. I took the stand and looked Karen right in the eye. She didn't blink. They grilled me, of course. Her defense attorney tried every trick in the book. Claimed I was combative, that I had exaggerated the scope of the intrusion, even that my refusal to join the HOA constituted a pattern of hostility. I kept my answers short, calm, and bulletproof. Yes, I own the deed. Yes, it was legally recorded in 2019. No, I never signed any HOA agreement. No, I was not informed of any reassessment. Yes, I was forcibly removed from my property. Yes, I have video footage, timestamps, and independent survey data to prove boundary tampering. Yes, I filed a restraining order. Yes, a forensic analyst confirmed the signature used was lifted from a prior case involving another victim. No, Val Harris was not capable of signing anything 3 days before he died. Dana followed that with the real heavy artillery, Vernon Nye's sworn affidavit, the hospice nurse's statement, the drone footage, the HOA emails. And then came the moment everything shifted. Marcy, who had flown in to testify herself, presented a timeline overlay of property reassignments filed through Ridge Hollow in the last 5 years. 7 parcels, all owned by elderly residents. All later donated in documents that bore strikingly similar phrasing, formatting, and, most damning of all, identical notary stamps. The courtroom went dead silent. Then, like salt in the wound, she dropped the HOA's internal document, Acquisition Strategy, Phase 2. That was when Karen's lawyer started sweating through his collar. Cross-examination was weak. They tried to suggest the documents were planted, claimed the drone footage could be deep-faked, even hinted that I'd orchestrated all this as retaliation against the HOA for repeated code violations. The jury wasn't buying it. Neither was the judge. The logistics company's CEO was subpoenaed next. He tried to play dumb, claimed he had no knowledge of direct negotiations, and assumed all agreements were made with full consent. But an email trail said otherwise. One line from Karen to him read, "We can lock down Parcel B as soon as Ashton is removed. Documents are ready for retroactive justification that wasn't just intent. That was conspiracy." The trial lasted 8 days. On the 9th, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, guilty. Karen McDaniels, convicted on 6 felony counts including real estate fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power through fraudulent municipal filings. Sentence, 13 years, no parole. Her associates got lighter sentences, 3 to 5 years, community service, permanent bans from HOA or municipal office work. The logistics CEO cut a deal to avoid jail, but his company was fined into near oblivion and permanently blacklisted from state infrastructure contracts. And the Ridge Hollow HOA dissolved by court order, all assets frozen, all remaining board members fired, residents given the option to self-manage or form a new transparent association under legal supervision. But that wasn't the most important ruling. Judge Holloway issued a unique injunction. Parcel B is to be permanently protected against any future HOA, municipal, or private reassignment efforts without written consent of the owner and judicial oversight. She even went a step further, citing the state's failure to protect individual landowners against systemic suburban overreach, and recommended a full audit of HOA legal frameworks across Colorado. Dana hugged me outside the courthouse. "You didn't just win your land back," she said. "You rewrote the playbook." Rick clapped me on the shoulder. "You ever think of running for something?" "I ran from paperwork for 22 years, I replied. "That's close enough to politics." The press tried to swarm me outside, but I waved them off. I'd had enough cameras for a lifetime. Let them dig through the filings. The story was in the evidence, not my face. I didn't want attention. I wanted peace. And now, for the first time in a long damn while, I had it. 3 weeks after the verdict, I stepped out of the motel for the last time. The manager, an old-timer named Stan who smelled like motor oil and breath mints, handed me a paper bag with a six-pack and said, "Hell of a fight, Bob. You ever run into trouble again, you got a room here for free." First night, at least I thanked him and didn't tell him I never wanted to see polyester curtains again. When I pulled up to my house, the front gate looked just as I left it, bent a little from Karen's tantrum, scuffed where the deputies had taped their damn temporary possession notice. But it was mine again. Every inch. I opened the gate slowly, almost ceremonially. The tires crunched on gravel, birds scattered from the eaves, and for a long minute I just sat in the driveway, staring at the porch swing. That old thing hadn't moved since they took me off the property. I guess the wind had been waiting too. Inside, nothing was touched. HOA didn't have the guts, or the legal clearance, to enter the house after the TRO hit. A thin layer of dust had settled on the mantel. The coffee had turned into tar sludge in the machine, but everything else was intact, like the house had been holding its breath. I exhaled for both of us. Over the next week, I cleaned, repaired the gate, changed the locks, installed new solar-powered floodlights, upgraded all 4 perimeter cameras to cloud-linked 4K units with backup batteries and motion sensors. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being practical. The fight was over, but I wasn't taking chances. Then came the sign. I'd had it custom-made by a guy in Boulder who did high-end laser etching for military plaques. Black aluminum, weather-resistant, tamper-proof mounting brackets. Cost me a small fortune and worth every cent. I mounted it just inside the front gate, dead center between the brick posts where no one could miss it. It read, "This property is not subject to any HOA. All interference is documented and stored off-site. Attempt fraud or entry, and you'll meet me in court. Retired law enforcement, fully armed, fully legal." Below it, in smaller letters, "This land is not for sale, not for lease, not for compromise." 2 hours after I put it up, someone from the news station emailed me asking for comment. I ignored it. I didn't want a talk show. I wanted a quiet porch and a hot cup of coffee, but word got out anyway. Over the next month, I got over 100 emails from homeowners, ex-HOA board members, even one city planner from Oregon, thanking me, asking for advice, sharing horror stories. Turns out what Karen tried to do to me was just the tip of a very ugly iceberg. So, against my better judgment, I started consulting. Not professionally, I'm no lawyer, but I know dirty paperwork when I see it, and I can spot a quiet reassignment scam a mile away now. I help folks navigate their deeds, challenge fraudulent reassessments, and push back against HOA board overreach. I don't advertise. People just find me. I call it retired cop property armor. Catchy, right? The best part, Val Harris's son came back one last time. He stood with me by the new gate, looking out at the same pasture his father once fought to keep untouched. "You did right by him," he said. I nodded. "I just wish he could have seen it." "He did," Matthew said. "You think a guy like him leaves without keeping an eye on the fight?" We laughed, drank a beer, watched the sun dip behind the pines. A week later, I caught someone trying to climb my back fence. Teenager, probably dared by his buddies. He dropped down fast when the floodlights kicked on and the audio warning triggered from the motion sensor. "You are being recorded." Law enforcement notified. The kid screamed and ran like hell. I didn't press charges, but I did make sure he saw the sign on his way out. One last thing. They're passing a new bill in the state house, something Rick and Marcy helped push through after my case broke wide open. It would require all HOAs to submit quarterly records for public review, prohibit retroactive boundary changes without judicial oversight, and criminalize land reassignment without direct consent of all affected property owners. They're calling it the Harris-Ashton Bill. Val's name first. That's exactly how it should be.